begin the.
Thank you, President Dan. Once president, always president, I think. So I'd also like to say a quick welcome to Katie Myers, who's joining us. Katie is Kim's daughter, and we're happy to have her as well. And Teresa is joining us from Port Orford as well. So happy to have as many guests as we can. For those of you who didn't get a chance to read Anne's biography, we are joined tonight by a humanitarian and French photographer who has traveled the world and has a passion for all of the things that matter to us. And I'm so happy that she's here in Oregon with us tonight. And we'd like to pass the mic to Ginny to do a special welcome for our French friend here in Oregon. Ginny?
Bonsoir, bonsoir tout le monde qui parle français. Bonsoir Anne. Vous êtes la bienvenue à la réunion de notre club rotarien. Nous sommes ravis de vous accueillir. Et je vous donne tout de suite la parole. Voilà.
Thank you so much. I was not expecting anybody speaking French. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Well, I'm actually going to start by thanking you all for welcoming me and for giving me a chance to actually show a little bit of my work. And so I know it's about 20 minutes, so hopefully I'm going to be on time. And but just very briefly, so that you know who I am, even though, well, you already know my name, and you will notice very quickly because of my French accent that I still have to work on my English, and I might put some Spanish words also because I've been in Mexico for the last 6 months. So anyway, my name is Anne Petry. And well, during 15 years, I actually worked in the luxury good industry. So in places that you might know, like Saint-Tropez, Cannes, Paris. And so those have been the places where I used to work during, I said, 15 years. But I always, even though I was working in those very luxurious places, I always tried to go back. I really needed something like more down to earth. So every time I had the opportunity to actually go away and just to travel, it's what I did. And it's during one of my trips in 2006 that I actually went to Nepal, get in touch with an NGO that takes care of street children in Nepal. And so I got involved, and I'm still involved in this NGO, and I'm still, every time I'm going back to France, start trying to do some fundraising. So it was quite interesting and quite funny for a lot of people, because during summertime, I used to work in Saint-Tropez with the richest people on the planet. And during the winter time, I used to go to Nepal and spending time with the poorest kids of the planet. So I really had like the two extremes, and but that's just who I am, I think. And at that time, it's what just really what I needed. So, but anyway, 8 years ago, I was working in Paris, and after a while, after a few years in Paris, that was just not anymore what I was looking for. I needed a break, so it's what I did. I just left my job, left my place, and decided to go on a trip, just like a 3-month trip, just to think about something else, to see a little bit what I wanted to do. So the trip was meant to be 3 months. And it's almost 8 years. For almost 8 years, I'm just traveling all around the planet, everywhere where I can go. And so I'm lucky enough for the last few years to actually live full-time my two passions that are traveling and photographing. And nowadays, I actually focus my photographic work on indigenous communities. So my goal is not just to go there, spending 2 hours with them, taking pictures and going away. No, I really try to understand how they live, what are their beliefs. And so I actually go there. Sometimes it's some really remote places. I live with them, literally. I cook with them, I work with them in the fields, I play with the kids in the river, and I really try to understand their way of life. And I really try to learn as much as possible, because those people have a knowledge that I think we have lost. I'm not especially saying you, but I'm more like talking about the French people. And so I always feel extremely grateful when those communities actually open their home and their village to me. So let's start with the virtual trip, and I'm going to try to show you some of the, to transmit you some of the teachings those people are actually giving me. And if I have to say like 3 words, I would say that mostly what I remember, what I keep always, and what I find always in those communities, no matter if they're in Asia, in South America, or in Middle East, it's tolerance, simplicity, and the importance, the extraordinary importance of our Mother Earth. So those are really the 3 keywords, I would say, that I can find everywhere where I'm going. So let's start with the picture, and give me 1 second to actually. Okay, here we are. All right. So the trip that I propose you right now is starting by a place, a region. It's in Himalaya. It's a region called Ladakh, and it's located in the north of India. It is an extraordinary place in terms of landscape, but as you can imagine, it's also very harsh, because the climate is super, super cold during wintertime. And people are having a very basic life. However, it is a stunning place, as said, and they have a very strong culture. And everywhere you go, it's just extraordinary landscape and very friendly people. So they are not, because they are coming from the mountains. And one thing that I could notice, people from the mountains are usually more like closed. They're not as welcoming, or they don't hug you right away. But they are, as I said, very friendly people. And actually, I'm thinking about going there during this summertime. And well, this picture, for example, was at 5,000 meters altitude. I was sleeping under a tent, and it was quite funny. Well, that was the sunset, and night comes pretty early, actually. So I just slept. I was freezing the entire night. Well, and I understood why the day after, when I woke up, everything was white and the tent was just full of snow. So that was, I mean, it was pretty hard for me, because as I said, this is 5,000 meters high. So lack of oxygen, the cold. But those people are just used. That's just where they were born, of course. But my point is, it's very interesting to see how the metabolism, how the body can actually adjust wherever you're going. Of course, it took me a while to actually feel good, so that I could breathe normally. But still, it's impressive, and we forget how our body can actually manage to go wherever we want to go, even though sometimes it is complicated. The trekking was pretty hard, but well, I was happy I made it. And for example, this man that you can see right now, it's a nomad, and he was pretty old, as we can see more or less on the picture. Well, he had absolutely no problem at all to actually walk hours and hours in the mountain with the goats, sheep, and carrying this bag, as you can see, all day long. And so they were a family of 5 people living at 5,000 meters, and they are moving according to the climate and according to where they find some grass for their herd. And they were actually very surprised. I remember it was a really beautiful encounter, because they were very surprised that I was interested by them. But obviously, when you see those faces, the way they live, for me, it was just, I mean, a real gift that I was not even expecting to see or to have at 5,000 meters high. Behind these men, you can see that's the house. It was a tiny stone house. The door, I really had to go like, to make myself really small to get in. There was no windows, and so no light inside. So it was super dark inside and very difficult at the beginning to actually see the people I was talking to. But this is to keep the heat inside. And as you can see, that's the wife. And well, every time they get inside, they spend lots of time outside, but whenever they get inside, well, there is no heater. That's the only heater they have. So they have to turn it on. And that is useful for everything, to be warm, to actually cook, to make a tea, whatever. This is that is primordial for them, and this is one of the first things they do when they get in. It was very, very funny because I said the house is tiny to keep the heat inside. So this woman, with all the clothes she had to be warm, she was actually just moving like that and grabbing things all around, because everything happened in only one room, one space. So they sleep here, they talk here, they cook here, they do everything in only one room. And they're also very, very religious people. It's every family is very proud to actually give one of their son to the monastery to become a monk. So one thing that is quite interesting in India, you might know, most of the people, I would say like 80% more or less of the people are Hindu, but Ladakhi people are actually Buddhists. And this was in a monastery, and I used to meditate quite a lot, but I didn't know this technique, and I learned it while I was there. They actually meditate while they're dancing, so clapping their hands and shaking, doing, they're not doing whatever they want, of course. They really have to respect a kind of dance, I would say. And that is a type of meditation. And I spent the whole day, I found it so fantastic. I spent the whole day just watching them and taking pictures. And well, what you can see right now is called a prayer wheel. So that's the way they actually pray. So sometimes these women just finished it. So sometimes they just do one round, and sometimes they spend like half an hour doing it. And yeah, so that's the Buddhist, the Tibetan Buddhist way to practice their religion. Okay, let's change the country, totally different part of the world. We're going to Colombia. This is La Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. And here, so that population, that's the house that you can see. So that gives you an idea. It was tricky to get there. It's a part of the country where I would say white-skinned people, which means foreigners, as well as Colombian white people, cannot access. You have to, on themselves. They have to go with a person who has the authorization from the indigenous people to actually get there. And those people are the Kogis. Those are the most remote population I went to meet, and I actually spent a total of 3 weeks with them. As you can see, very, very basic way of life. Of course, using the fire, everything is done on the floor. And they have one thing special in terms of outfits. They all wear white all the time. And well, no shoes, usually no shoes, unless they go to the town. And the people who go to the town are mostly the men or the young men, if they need to sell something or to buy salt or rice, stuff like that. But otherwise, for example, this young girl, the one who is more or less 12 years old, because she doesn't know it, they don't know exactly their age. She went while I went down to town, which means like 5 to 6 hours walking distance from her village. She went back with me, and that was the first time she actually saw the Western world or the civilization. So it was just same. I mean, incredible to actually be with her while she, for the first time, saw a car or people who have the same outfit as we have. So it was very, very interesting to be on her side at that moment. And yeah, so as you can see, they look dirty, but they're really not. I mean, the clothes they have, yeah, look dirty, but it's coming from nature because kids are playing all the time on the floor, in the river, on the trees. But they are really one of the cleanest population I met because they have water everywhere. And so every time they feel like just having a bath, which means more or less like 3 times a day, for the kids even more, they just run to the river and they just shower. So I said, it's just really, they look dirty like that, but there was absolutely no smell. And I spent some time, I said, sleeping in their house and being right next to them. And it was just fantastic spending this time with them. It's very basic also over there. Kids work quite a lot, but it's probably some of the happiest kids I've ever seen. Because if they're working, as you can see on this picture, whenever they want, they just leave the things and just run to the river and start playing with whatever they have. So, and it's quite funny because, well, I guess in the US it's the same. I mean, when you see a kid playing with a knife, or yeah, you're just kind of telling him, well, no, just leave it, it's dangerous. Well, those kids are playing with what you can see. It's not even a knife. I'm not sure how you call that in English, but it's huge. And every time I was touching that, I was trying not to hurt myself. Well, those kids are just playing and they're just used to this, and spending hours playing in the water. So I really have seen some very, very happy kids. Okay, we stay in Colombia, but that's another part of Colombia, more like central Colombia. And the population is called the Misak. And I show you these populations, so they're really not as remote as the Kogis that you just saw. But I wanted to show you those pictures because they really have the specificity of those people is really the outfit. So they are not wearing this outfit for a special occasion. They just all the time like this. So this picture, for example, has been taken in a market, and yeah, and still use very traditional way of doing the material. And they are not, so they're used to see Colombian and even tourists coming to the town, but they're not used to accept anybody coming to the villages. And once again, I've been extremely lucky. I met the white person who introduced me to another good person, and all this made that I could stay almost a week in one of these villages and spending time with them. And in this case, because I always try also to help with my picture a way or another, they wanted to develop, at one point, they wanted to develop the kind of ecotourism, but they didn't have any content, photographic content. So all the pictures I took, so they literally opened me their doors, and all the pictures I took, I actually gave to them just before leaving, so that they could use them for any purpose they need in terms of developing the ecotourism. Okay, different country, Iran. Iran has been an incredible, fantastic discovery, honestly, for me. I had everything we hear in the media, I had all this in my head, and I wanted to push a little bit my limits. So honestly, I went there to actually see what I could handle. And well, to make a long story short, I had in mind to stay like 3 weeks. I actually almost stayed 2 months. The country, the landscape is absolutely stunning. And I have seen I'm just going back, sorry. And I have met some of the most welcoming population I've ever seen in the different countries where I've been. Very rich in terms of architecture, in terms of art. So it's really an incredible country, and I'm really looking forward to go back, because as I could realize in many other different countries, the government has nothing to do with the population. I mean, you cannot it's difficult, and I try not to do this anymore, to actually describe a country according to its government, because there are two things different. And I said, I've never met people as welcoming as Iranian people ever. So of course, you have the women who are wearing the hijab. So I needed to have one also. I didn't have the black one, but I had the one that covers my hair. And it was quite funny because, yeah, I have to tell you this story. So when you see, and of course this picture, I kind of like it because it's a little bit like artistic, but the women have actually, when they're outside, they have to wear the hijab. And I'm not really fan of the concept of the idea, but when they're coming back home, it's very interesting because I lived with several people, several families, and it was every time it was the woman who was actually running the house. And I remember this one time getting inside the house with the family, and the woman literally dropped the hijab, and it's her husband who had to run behind and to actually take it from the floor and who put it in the closet. So I found it so funny because we imagine all the Iranian women like those poor little thing. The women I've seen, maybe I've been lucky, I'm not saying it's the case in every family, but the women I've seen had a lot of power inside the house. So the contrast was very different from what I was expecting and from what I heard before in the news, for example. I've put this picture just to show how it was in the past. So this is really down to the south of Iran. And the women in the past, because that woman was a little bit old, were wearing that. This is not the case anymore. So at that time, they found it pretty nice, and that's the way it was. But nowadays, there is absolutely no young person or no young woman wearing this type of mask. But yeah, so that's how it was in the past. And yeah, and during my time in Iran, I really wanted to meet some nomads. So I went to a remote place, same in the mountains, and I could meet some nomads, and I spent a week with them. So it was, and if you notice, it's quite interesting because I've showed you this little stone house in Himalaya, and this is almost in the desert in Iran, and same type of stone house. So those people who never talk to each other, who are in very different part of the world, well, they just adjust to the landscape and to the temperature the same way. Because when I mention desert, it doesn't mean that it's 40 degrees all the time. During nighttime, it is really cold. And again, people who are living a very basic life. And that was very nice because as I was staying with this family in the evening, the young men actually took the instruments. And as you can see, the first one on the left-hand side, he has the very traditional instrument, and they were playing all night long. And same, I think we're not expecting lively people like them when we're talking about Iranian people, for example. So it was really a great time, and of course doing everything by themselves. So that woman was actually doing the bread. They eat whatever they can cultivate in nature, what they can harvest. So they really have their life is really connected to nature. And well, this is Colombia and the emperor. And I'm going to go a little bit faster because otherwise I'm really going to run out of time. I focused on the women. So that was really the idea. They needed some pictures to develop the handicraft. So I focused on the women, and I found some very, very strong women. So even though they were complaining about not sure about the word in English, but machism, so like the power of the men and all this, but those women were extremely strong and were doing everything by themselves, like going in the jungle and just cutting whatever they needed to do the handicraft. And one thing very particular in this community, the woman actually do some tattoo on her face. So this is done with what is called jagua, which is a natural coming from the nature, and it remains like 10 days more or less. And all the little symbols that she has on her face are symbols from nature. And so that picture. This is done with the traditional jaguar. And when they want to make it faster, they just take some lipstick. And so that's the red color. So that's the kind of modern way to actually, and I find it interesting, like keeping the tradition, but doing it like the modern way. So yeah. And now it's Mexico, so that's the last pictures I've taken in January, and I went to this region called La Sierra Madre Occidental, and say very closed people. They are not keen on sharing their tradition or their beliefs. But I went a first time in November. It worked super well, the connection between them and me. And they invited me in January to come back because they had a whole week of celebration. And so this is when, and it was, yeah, I said a whole week. So again, sleeping under a tent. And that was, those are some pictures from the ceremony. So it was beautiful. When the women always have these traditional outfits, the men wear the traditional outfit when they have some celebration. And so it was just in terms of photography, it was incredible to be there at that time. The Wiraricas really suffered a long time and still do actually from the fact that they're animist people. I should start by this. They're animist people. And so they do, especially during this week in January, they do sacrifices to actually thank Mother Earth. And so they have been considered like a bad way from the other Mexican people for this reason. And well, I'm a vegetarian. I'm following the Buddhist traditions. So when I heard that I would see all around like sacrifices, I was a bit scared. Like I didn't know how I would handle the situation. And I found, and you're not obliged to believe me, but I said, I spent a whole week with them day and night. I've seen several sacrifices. They have lots of respect for the animals, and everything they do is really to thank Mother Earth. And the shaman talks. So you can see on this picture on the background, you can see the cow. They actually ask the cow, the goat, or the sheep if the cow, for example, allow them to take its life to actually thank Mother Earth and to have good luck for the starting year. And it has been done with lots of respect. And I'm not going to go too much into the details because you're probably maybe still eating, but it's really done. I mean, you don't see the animals. I was scared about hearing the animals suffering and all this. It was really not the case. And finally, yeah, just to finish, and so those are the pictures from India, because India is one of the countries where I spend most of my time. So I'm not going to get too much into the tradition and the beliefs of Hindu people. It would be way too long, but at least you can see some pictures. And so this is in the south of India. I spent quite a lot of time in an ashram. And so all around you have lots of Hindu people. And well, same. I mean, it's not necessary for me to say that they have a very basic life and that they are just, once again, living from everything that nature is actually giving them. And I'm going to finish with those two pictures because I find it quite interesting. And this is some people that you don't find anywhere else on the planet than in India. They are called sadhu. And those men, and few women, but mostly men, actually decided at one point to dedicate their life to Hinduism and to the religion. So they actually quit everything, work, house, family, everything, to dedicate their life to the religion. And to have a very, very, very simple life. So they are sleeping in the street, only living, they're not working anymore, and only living from whatever the other Hindu people are actually giving them. Could be food, could be money, but and those people have, well, these men, for example, I met him on the street because it's a street where I used to spend quite a lot of time, and nearby a sacred mountain. And those people really have something special, as you can see. And this is my last picture of a sadhu, because I said, yeah, you won't find any other sadhu in the world. Nepal, India and Nepal, those two countries, because those are the two countries where you have Hinduism. Okay, well, that's it. And I'm sorry if I took too much time. Sorry for that. All right, just here we are.
Thank you, Anne. We do have some time for a few questions. Heather, you want to kind of monitor? Andrew has a question.
And I have two questions. First of all, were you a photographer when you were working for the luxury firm? Or are these skills that you acquired later? And then the second, perhaps more important question is, what were the advantages and disadvantages of being a woman visiting these different societies?
All right. Well, to answer to the first question, no, I was working in hotels, in 5-star hotels, so nothing to do with photographing. It's really somehow a skill that that I kind of, I mean, which again, I'm going to talk with my beliefs, but that the universe gave me, and that I try to train, and I'm still learning, honestly. Like every time, I mean, depending the light, depending of the color of the skin, for example, you don't take the picture the same way, and so I'm still learning, and also depending of the environment, of course. But no, I mean, all this just kind of, I don't know, just appeared, and just listening to hearing the people telling me that my pictures were really nice, and well, this is when I decided to try to make something of it. And I'm not even talking about money, but mostly sharing. And I said, I'm so lucky to be able to go and meet those people that it would be just a shame, I think, keeping them on my computer and not sharing all this. And my goal, honestly, is, I mean, and even not talking about money, my goal is really to be the link in between those remote communities and people like you, or people like my family who are living in a small village in France. So just try to be the link. And second question, being a woman, honestly, it's a gift. And I'm not sure if that's the good word to say, but it helped me so many times. Yeah. So of course, I have to be careful. There are countries where I need to be more careful than others. India is one of them. So I have my pepper spray. Not sure, well, I've never had to use it so far, but sometimes, yeah, I have it in my hands. But I also know that there are some rules. I don't walk on my own during nighttime. I always try to be back at my hostel when it's dark. And yeah, I said there are rules, and by traveling, and I'm still learning. After 8 years, they're still. And you know what? For example, Mexico, the Huiraricas that I showed you, not like right now, because as I went in January, it's quite quite a dangerous place. Honestly, I'm not sure there is any other words to use, but it would be dangerous for men and women. So at the end, I didn't put me in a risk more than if I would have been a man. And being a woman, and that's the great opportunity I always found, people are not, how should I say that? They open their door way faster and way easier. And they don't have any trouble with me taking pictures of the kids. Of course, I always ask before, but I never had a no, because I'm a woman, and I think that's really make a big difference. So no, I said, I always found myself really lucky being a woman and not a man.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Scott?
Yes, I just found this fascinating, and I was a newspaper reporter for a number of years, and I always tell my students now here at the University of Oregon that the most satisfying, gratifying reporting I did was when I got out of the United States and met new cultures that I didn't know. And so I don't really honestly have a question as much as I resonated with what you were saying, is that poor, I found the poorer that the people were, the less that they had, the more willing and unquestioningly were they able and willing to share what their lives, their food. And the stories that I came back, because I couldn't rely on the administrative bureaucratic structure for my stories. I had real people in my stories. And I remember once my editor very tellingly asking, well, why don't you do stories like this when you're here and at home? So I think it's a fascinating door that you're opening with your photography. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
I do have a question, Anne. Could you, I might have missed this, but what state in Mexico were you visiting? And two, in Iran, were you in the Balochistan area of south eastern Iran, or was this another portion of South Iran?
Okay, well, regarding Mexico, I've been, as I said, I've been here for the last 6 months, and so I recovered quite a big part, quite a big part of the country from Mexico City, where I used to live, and I learned a lot 12 years ago by living in Mexico City in terms of rules, and that I still remind me myself when I'm traveling on my own. So not being alone, doing nighttime in some kind of risky neighborhood. Even though, and I have to say, honestly, Mexico, I feel way safer in Mexico than I feel in Paris. So it's really same. Iran and Mexico, I really think those two countries, as well as Colombia, actually, are really suffering from the bad image the medias are giving us. And I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm not saying what the media are saying is not correct. I'm just saying that there are some other people who are extremely friendly and all this. So, and that those countries deserve that we give them a chance by visiting them. So that's my point, and this is what I try to do to everybody when I do this type of conversation. And so Mexico, from Mexico City, I went down to Chiapas. From Chiapas, I went to Oaxaca region, and from Oaxaca region, I went to Guadalajara. So the place, this area, Guadalajara, and which is kind of Sinaloa, there is this cartel called narco-trafficking cartel that called Sinaloa cartel. And so it is, I mean, you have to be a little bit conscious about where you're going. And unfortunately, where the Wirarica live right now, because of the mountains and the remote places, the narco traffickers just think that they can do whatever they want, and that the militaries are actually not going there, which is not true, because in January, I said the violence was getting higher again, but I was stopped 3 times by the militaries. So I didn't have the impression that the Mexican government just let the narco traffickers doing whatever they wanted. Not at all. Unfortunately, the Wirarica people just don't have the choice. They don't have guns, and they have just to do whatever is happening. And the man from the family with whom I stayed a few months ago, while he was going to the town about 2 hours away, has been stopped by some narco traffickers, and they just took everything he had in the car. So obviously, while I went there in January, I left and I do that with pleasure. I left my phone, my computer, everything in the town. And so then we still had to recover like 5 hours by car to get to the village. And my camera was, I hid my camera in the car. So that is from Mexico. And Iran, same. Iran, I traveled quite a lot. Well, 2 months, I had time. So I started in Tehran, went down to the south, and then went up again on the west coast, up to the mountains from the north. But at that time, it was getting winter time, and so super, super cold. So unfortunately, I couldn't go like really to the top north as I wanted. And Iran is fascinating in the sense that if you are going in Tehran, which is really developed, and then you're going to the south and the other type of Muslim people, they don't really get along. So it's quite interesting to see. But depending the region, and then you go to the mountains where you have nomadic people. So population is extremely different. I mean, it's really depending where you're going, you will see different type of Iranian people. So in that sense, it has been extremely interesting and I would love to go back. So at one point.
Great. Well, thank you, Anne, for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's fascinating.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry because I took more time than expected.
It was wonderful.
No problem. It's
It was wonderful.
fascinating. Thank you. And you're welcome to continue to join us as we
Well, as I was saying to Heather, and I take advantage to actually thank you again, Heather, for making this possible, really. I'm going to Panama, and Panama I will be traveling again, backpacking and meeting another population. So I still have lots of work to finish on the Wirarica. So I'm very sorry for that, and I hope you won't mind, but I'm just gonna go back working on the picture and to finish all this to then go to Panama with my head a little bit like open.
well, buenas noches then.
Buenas noches, merci beaucoup, merci.
Bye.
Merci, au revoir.
Okay, so I did want to take an opportunity